All right, everybody. Welcome to 24 Sladen. I'm here with Norrell. How's it going, man?
I'm good.
Yeah, long time no see.
Yeah, I think it was Howard's. Last time was Howard's memorial.
Yeah, that was it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what you been up to?
Let's see what's been going on lately. I started this new gold company, so that's really been most of what it is. Dealing with and understanding how the economic factors of the political situation that this country is in terms of the diversity of how people are and what people believe in.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of given me a different perspective of looking at it. 'Cause I deal with mainly Republicans now,
Yeah.
and their point of view and how they see it versus a Democratic point of view of how I'm pretty much seeing the world. So I get to hear both sides of it. So it's actually opened me up to understanding a little bit of the diversity. I mean, I'm surprised by how crazy the people in the country is, especially the people that follow Trump. I've never seen or heard Americans be so divisive in their hatred outside of the racist stuff. Yeah, so I think that's what's been going on lately.
And where'd you grow up?
Well, Melroy and I, my older brother and I, we were both born in Spokane, Washington on an Air Force base.
Nice.
And then, my parents got married in England in 1957. So where I think 30 states at that point, it was still against the law for them to be married. And so when they got married in Manchester, England, my father brought my mother here to LA before he got transferred to Texas. And that was the first place that they went to as a couple. And my mother could stay with my dad. I think she was there for like a week, and she had to leave because it was illegal for them to be living in the same house in Texas at the time. So she came back and lived with my grandmother in Watts. And then they then got transferred. My father got transferred to Spokane, Washington in 58. Melroy was born in 59. I was born in 60. And then my dad got transferred to Montana. And that's where Arlen was born. And he was born at Air Force Base in Montana. And then my father was forced out of the military for being married to a white woman. And then that's when we came back here and moved to 41st and Hoover, right over there. And then my brother Lawrence was born in White Memorial.
Nice.
So, but it was an interesting time. I mean, I guess when we were kids, I mean, that's when I think the family was really connected. I mean, I know I was, as a kid, I was always at your dad's house, going up there a lot. I remember going up there a lot, and Uncle Bill's house, and being around all of them, and Aunt Emma and Aunt B, going to Aunt B's house. And I don't know if you remember ever going to Aunt B's house.
Yeah, I used to go there, and I used to go to Rel's house a lot.
Yeah.
A lot of.
And Aunt B used to have the train thing in the backyard.
Yeah.
She had the train set. And Sundays they used to have dinner there, and they used to cook chitlins.
Yes.
I'll never forget that. That smell will never. Just that whole dynamic and how she was, and she was just always a really good, loving person.
Yes.
She wasn't really mean. Neither was Aunt Emma. Aunt Emma or Uncle Luke was another one. Uncle Luke, going to his house over there off of like 28th and Vermont. Going to his house a lot.
Yeah.
And being around Joyce, his daughter.
Okay.
I don't know if you remember Joyce.
I remember Joyce.
Yeah, she's the one that had the car accident, lost her eye.
Okay, I think
Debbie's mother.
Yeah, I think I remember. I'd have to see her.
Debbie's mother. But she's also, part of that whole Slayton line that all of us go through. So lived there until, I think, 71. And then we went to England. And then we were there for about a year. And then we came back, and my dad was gone. And I think that's when our family disconnect happened. And at that point, it was just, streets for me.
So how was it growing up in East LA? I mean, not East LA, in LA. Like back then, because I grew up in East LA, which was totally different.
I mean, I think part of it, as we talked a little bit about that prior to this, the dynamic of being biracial in a country where race is so prevalent,
Hmm.
right? And then being um, part of a race that's not as widely cheered upon,
Yeah.
right? In terms of being black, and not really looking that part, but having had a whole family of growing up with, grandmother and all of that, grandfather and stuff, wanting to be identified as, you know,
Yeah.
always wanting to have that identification, but you don't really get it, and then having an English part of my family and not really identifying there either, makes it a little difficult. And I would say it's probably not the easiest part, I think, because you not having been fully one thing, I'm not sure how one feels about it. I think it's just probably second nature to just be who you are,
Yeah.
right? But when you have this other dynamic happen, I would suppose it might be the same thing as being raised in a house with a Jewish mother and a Catholic father, or whatever. It's like not 100% of one or the other, and then trying to identify. Um,
When you were like growing up, because whatever. I mean, how old were you when you came back from England? And
I was 12.
so 12. So how did? Because for me, growing up, I grew up in like mostly Hispanic, but I was half Hispanic, half black, and
Right.
a lot of people knew my dad, but it was just kind of it was a little different, but not too bad. It wasn't too racist in not racist, like that kind of racist in East LA, but in when I would go to visit everybody else out there, when I go out, we go, in West LA and Watts and whatever we went to out there, it was different. Like they treated me different because like I'm not the same. I'm different. Like I didn't look like everybody else. And I got treated a little bit different. The family was different. They kind of, but even some of the kids growing up, some of our family, they treated me a little different. And then plus my brother went, which was my older brother, and he's all Mexican. So, but he actually went to school in Watts when he was younger when my mom moved over there. So my mom lived in Watts, and he was like the only Mexican in that. Like you see a school picture, and hey, there's Anthony. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it was different. But when I went, I felt I was treated a little different because I was, I guess, light skinned, if you want to call it, but really light skinned. So, you know, but there was just even being light skinned growing up, I was treated different. Like not treated one way or the other way.
I, you know, I think when you talk about the dynamic of our family, right? My experience, I'd say this is what I call pre father leaving
Yeah.
and post father leaving, right? So the dynamic when my dad was around when I was a kid was I never felt isolated. I always felt I was part of, because he was there and we were always around. And then when he left, there was an isolation part where we weren't always around. We weren't part of it. So when I would sometime go to family things, I always felt like a little bit of an outsider because I hadn't really been around that much.
Yeah.
And it's still the same way today. When they have family stuff and we go to it, I'm not as close with everybody as some of the other ones would be, right? In that regards. But I think, when you live in a predominantly black neighborhood and your mother's English,
Yeah.
and you're going to have to deal with a lot of stuff that, is not conducive for a normal kid's childhood, right?
Yeah.
You know, from not only the racial part of it, then there's the economic stuff that you feel a part that you have to go through and feeling the shame and the embarrassment of being poor and on welfare.
Yeah.
And then, then trying to feel like I'm just like you,
Yeah.
but I just happen to be a lot lighter than you.
Yeah.
Right. So see me as an equal. And then, we also were going to school in Hollywood, so that made it even more difficult because it's like, I want you to see me as being black,
Yeah.
but I'm going to school in Hollywood, and I'm kind of now understanding that I kind of don't want you to see me as being black. I kind of want you to see me as being white. And
Yeah.
so I'm like caught in between, but I'm dressing like a gang member, you know, khakis and suspenders and duckbills and bomber jacket, you know, hanging bandana and trying to be an associate, right? And then hanging out with kids who live in the Hollywood Hills and being friends with them, and they're wearing OP shorts and stuff. It was just this whole, you know, it's like, I mean, it's like Dorothy from Wizard of Oz when she's in that house and it's spinning.
Yeah.
That's what was happening. It's like that whole junior high, middle high school years were just a spin for me, right? And yeah, it was like, you know, and then you throw in, you know, the whole dynamic of father leaving you, so you don't, you know, you're kind of you're mad at your mother, feeling it's her fault, right? And then you don't want to blame your father because you're hoping he would come back, and then you don't know where he is, and then there's no money, you know. And the only thing that seemed to relieve all of that stuff was just get into drugs.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Do drugs and do crime.
How was it? Like, how were the kids in Hollywood treating you?
You know, that wasn't always as easy either. You know what I mean? Because you know, we're talking the '70s in America, where, you know, race was just such a prevalent upheaval,
Yeah.
right? And so black hadn't really become cool yet.
Yeah.
Like it is today, right?
Yeah.
You know,
It was way different.
if it had been cool like it is today back then, I would have been like more of a celebrity.
Yeah.
Right? I would have got a little bit more shine for sure.
Yeah.
You know, but it hadn't really hit, you know, and then there was the whole thing with inside the black community about being light skinned.
Yes.
Right? So that hadn't really become cool yet either, right? And so you weren't in some cases, you know, you weren't black enough.
Yes.
You weren't white enough. You're kind of caught in between, and, you know, it's the dynamic of, why do you sound white? You know, well, my mom's English, so I mean, you know, yo, y'all, and them's not being spoken by home, so I'm only emulating what's going on in my house, and, you know, and then, you know, you're going to school and you're surrounded by somewhat celebrity kids, right? So I'm going to school there, but I'm taking the bus, public bus, not even school bus. I'm literally taking, in those days, RTD, you know, and yeah, it was, you know, you go there and you hang out all day there and you look at kids, you become friends with the kids who live in the Hollywood Hills, and then you leave and you go back into the South Central, and, you know, you're not feeling comfortable in any of the worlds.
Yeah.
Right now, you're just uncomfortable in life, and there's a lot of anger and, you know, and confusion. You know, I think today some kids really kind of have it a little bit lucky because there's child psychologists, and that wasn't available back in that day. You know.
Yeah. Just deal with it.
You deal with it.
Yeah.
And how do you deal with it? You know, you start learning how to smoke pot at 12. You know, and you start emulating certain people in the neighborhood who seem to have, like, they seem to be smarter, or they got something kind of going on, so you're kind of looking at them a little bit. Right? Yeah. And yeah, that's kind of how it went, you know, for a while, until my mom was able. It took her after we came back from England, it took her 3 years of scraping to get enough money to be able to move to Hollywood and full time, and that's what happened. You know. But periodically I would go down to the gym. I would see Bill. Yeah. I'd go down there. I'd go fight a little bit in the gym. You know, every once in a while we'd see some people from the family, but I think there was probably a 5-year period where I didn't really see too many people from the family side of it. Yeah. So we're really definitely isolated in a lot of ways.
I think when my mom moved to Watts, that's when because she knew your mom pretty good, and they talked. I think when she moved to Watts, they used to talk more, and then I guess she moved away. They didn't really talk as much, and then your mom moved back to England, right?
Then my mom, at one point, later on, my mom went back to England. Yeah, when we were a little bit older and stuff, but she went back twice trying to live there, and she left there for a reason. You know, she left there for a reason, and but she tried a couple of times. I think she was there once when Melroy was there, and she had to leave because Melroy created such havoc. That's another story and
Yeah.
another chapter.
Now, right.
Yeah,
I
from
gotta,
another one.
yeah, I
You
gotta bring
know.
him here. I
Yeah.
talk to him every once in a while. So you talked about like drugs and like turning to drugs and all this other stuff. Like how long did that last, or how did that go, or what happened there?
Well, I mean, I think that like for a lot of people, I think it's I think when you what they call it today, they call it child trauma, right? That's what they call it today, child trauma. When you go through some adversity in your childhood, they call it child trauma, right? So I think when you've gone through some adversity or um, trauma
Yeah.
as a child and it's untreated, you're trying to find a way to create some sort of pain relief. And unfortunately, there isn't a pharmacy on the corner with someone that's able to prescribe something in a normal fashion. So, the simplest thing, especially in the '70s, was just start with pot and then alcohol, and and then from there let it go to open the door to run as crazy as you could. So, I think some of it was to you know so you're socially disconnected because you don't feel like you're part of,
Yeah.
right? You are shameful from being poor. You have an abandonment issue because your father's left, right? And so, and now you're looking up to older guys in the neighborhood to try to help fill that void of that guy that's left you. So now when I'm 12, the guys I'm hanging out with are 15, 16. So whatever they're doing, I'm following their lead from sports to, drinking and doing drugs to committing crimes, and it's funny, like, and I tell people this, they talk about the typical somewhat black experience in America, right, from the inner city perspective. A lot of it is, you know, household without a father, single mother, on welfare, or at least some sort of financial struggle, trying to raise these kids without really any help,
Hmm.
right? And then those kids end up getting into the street and experiencing all of that stuff. So as much as I never seem to fit into being quote unquote seen as being black, my experience has been definitely from my knowledge of having talking to a bunch of guys that I know, that my experience was very much a typical black experience in America. There was no differentiation about my color,
Yeah.
from my experience. So that part I can say I've truly do know what it's like to be black in America from that perspective for sure. So the drugs and alcohol just seem to take off the pain. Just you forget how bad it is. You forget that you live in a one-bedroom apartment with five people,
Yeah.
right? You forget that there's not always enough food. You forget about all of that stuff. It allows you at least a bit of a relief. Some pretending of being happy.
And then, yeah, that's different. Like I when I grew up, I kind of grew up same thing with all the people, and like I seen a lot of my friends doing drugs, and I just never. Actually, my brother did a lot of my older brother, he
Yeah.
did a lot of stuff. So I kind of seen him, and I'm like, it doesn't really seem fun to me. And that doesn't seem the road to go on. And I think my dad, because my dad was, well, they weren't together, but like I seen him on the weekends. He got me into riding dirt bikes or bicycles or whatever it was, and I think that was my kind of release. And I think that's probably my drug of choice, you know, riding dirt bikes and motorcycles, and so that's that. I think that kept me off of doing like stuff like that.
Well, I think the thing that you said, which is the most important part, I think for any child is, especially for a boy, is his father's involvement in his life.
Yeah,
Right? It's very seldom that you see like these athletes are when they talk about, a lot of times they talk about how their father was involved, or and helped them out and kept them off the streets and
yeah,
kept them involved. And I think that the lack of a father figure opens the door for almost anything to come walking in to give you some sort of similarity of what a man is supposed to be,
yeah,
right? And you get lost and the disbelief or the fantasy of what someone's being telling you that is the truth of how a man is supposed to be. And most of it's just such a fantasy that you end up living till you kind of wake up one day and find out a lot of that wasn't true.
Yeah.
You know?
Then you see what your mom's going through and how she's like trying to. It's kind of hard to see that, I think, for you.
I think a lot of it is I think when you're in a survival mode, just seeing what's outside the day tomorrow isn't even irrelevant to you. It's like a day to day thing. You're going from moment to moment to try to survive for today. And unfortunately, I think what happens, speaking for myself, I think what happens when survival is the main form of education, it prevents you from believing that there's something bigger and better for you out there. You know, you just survive and you shoot from the hip every day the best way you can. You know, and then that's what leads you into different things.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's how. I think if you sat and probably talked to most people that are incarcerated, that come from an impoverished background and a lack of resources, I think they would talk about how survival was what it is that they pretty much were doing and weren't thinking about the consequences for what will get them locked up because they're just trying to survive.
Yeah.
You know?
And then the people that they're hanging around with are doing the same thing, so they kind of, that's you kind of feel that's the way to do it.
I mean, and for those that are fortunate enough to awaken at an early age in that survival mode, and they find that survival for them is school, right? In some cases, it's a job, and they just work really hard. They're the fortunate ones, but I think that probability, the percentile of how many never make it out of the survival mode is probably much smaller. Than those that were raised in an affluent area. Doesn't matter about the color. I think if you're raised with a little bit of financial resources and survival not being your daily function in life, I think you have a better shot at having a fairly good life, right?
Yeah.
I think. I don't know because I've not been there, but
Yeah.
I can only see from the perspective as a father with a child now, and they're seeing how her life has been. For her, I don't think she's had the same struggles.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, like kind of the same with my son. He's hasn't really struggled too much.
But the interesting thing that I had this conversation with a friend of mine back when my daughter was younger, and I was saying like, my daughter doesn't realize how hard it is. She's so lucky, right?
Yeah.
And my friend said to me, everyone's childhood is a struggle. And their struggle is their struggle. It can't be a on par for par kind of struggle,
Yeah.
right? Because then they said, so what do you think your mom's childhood was like? And I was like, oh, wait a minute. My mom was born in 1934 in Manchester, England. So by the time she was 8, her community was being bombed by the Nazis. So she lived from probably 41 till like 44, 45 in a city that was being bombed and where she had to go into a bomb shelter. And then I think about like what the people are going through in the Ukraine, right?
Yeah.
And you think about those little kids, their struggle can never be compared. And I couldn't compare my struggle as a biracial kid in South Central to having been raised in a place where rations in shelters for 4 or 5 days underneath the ground, while you come out and maybe the little girl that you were friends with who wasn't lucky enough to get out of the bombing part of it, she's gone.
Yeah.
Half your neighborhood is destroyed because of it being bombed. Okay, how bad is it to walk to the store trying to buy milk and bread and have to fight some guy to keep the money in your pocket?
Yeah.
I probably would take that a little bit more than waking up in the morning and finding out like half my neighborhood's been bombed out. So,
Yeah.
Everyone's struggle is a little different. And, you can compare your son and say, oh, his struggle isn't that bad, but he's got his own stuff that he's got to deal with, right?
Yeah, he does.
Yeah, and my kid's got the same stuff, right? She grew up in a more affluent sort of neighborhood where a lot of her friends' parents were married.
Yeah.
But she's the isolated one who's got the divorced parents, right? And and that kind of stuff. So I think, yeah, everyone's struggle is different. You know,
Yeah, it's true.
you can't. I don't think we can compare pain,
No,
right?
no.
That's.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing that everyone tries to do. I mean, you like back at your kid, you go, "Oh,
Back in my day.
my kid's so lucky. He got a car when he was 16. I didn't get a car till I was 24, or whatever it is."
Had to buy it
that you
myself.
look at it,
and
right?
Yeah.
But then that kid's struggle is so much different because time is so much different, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you look at it today, it's like their world existence is through a little phone, right? Our world existence was the world, right? Their world is shrunk to a certain degree. They have the ability to touch the world in a certain way,
Yeah.
right? But truly, they touch the world through a small little phone, where we had to touch the world through actually touching the world. So it's a little different, you know, in terms of their perspective and how they see the world, you know.
That's good. That's a good point. I like that one.
Yeah. So
Maybe my son will listen to that one. Oh, yeah, he's here.
yeah.
It wasn't that bad.
No, you know, but like I said, I think everyone's is different.
Yeah.
You know, everyone's childhood is so different, and the perspective and the pain they go through. It's like everything else, right? You know, I always use the analogy that life is a bus ride. You never know who's going to sit next to you for how long they'll be there. The scenery always changes, and the road goes up and down, and then one day it comes to a stop. It's pretty much how, you know, kind of look at it today.
Yeah, that's true.
So, George bus ride's a little different.
Yeah, his ride is a little bit different.
Yeah, he's got hip hop music in the background or something.
Yes.
My struggles are like I had to deal. Well, it was like a transitioning world from like being the real to the phone world because the cell phone was just getting popular,
Yeah.
and then like I guess like I also had to deal with a lot of like a big chunk of my friends are like gay and trans, which is stuff you'd probably have never even thought of, and like all of that is becoming a lot more public, and like people are just a lot. They have the ability to be themselves more.
No, true. I mean, yeah, and that's one of the things that I like. My daughter, you know, she grew up with friends who had, you know, two parents of the same sex, and so for her, you know, things don't matter. That stuff is not as prevalent as a life experience as ours was, right?
Yeah.
I grew up in a you know, in a predominantly black neighborhood where that wasn't going to be free freedom and free speech and,
Yeah.
and free whatever was not what was willing to be accepted, right? And so my daughter tells me all the time I'm a dinosaur, right? And my girlfriend will tell me that I'm a little homophobic or whatever, and it's like, you know, but you learn to try to adapt to the best of your ability, right? It's not always going to be perfect, but
Yeah, when we grew up, it was different. There wasn't the same. You didn't have. You knew there was maybe a few gay kids in school, and you knew who they were, but that was it. They were kind of, and that was it. Nowadays, there's a lot. Everybody's around, and you don't treat them any different, and I don't treat them any different, and it's just that it's kind of like becoming. What did I say, Jordan? Take a drink. It's kind of like because we always see it, so we're not homophobic. It's just for us. It's not. We have to learn to deal with it, like us and our generation, because growing up to it, it's different.
I think the difficult part for me has been like having grown in an era of where the misperception of what the man is supposed to be.
Yeah.
Right. Especially when you come from a black perspective in America, right? And so I still have difficulty at times watching a show where two guys will kiss.
Yeah.
You know, it's not something that I'm as free and easily willing to deal with, and it's not because I dislike that. It's just that it's still something that's not as openly, I would say, from inside acceptable, but I'm tolerant enough to allow people to be themselves. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It's kind of weird though. Like It's kind of weird. Most guys are okay with two girls kissing. Most guys,
No, I think
yeah,
that, of course, I
yeah.
think that's,
But then
yeah.
when they say two guys kissing, it's like, I mean, it's still like a double standard. But it's
Well,
that's
that's because of the machoism that
yeah,
we've falsely been given it the way we're supposed to be,
yeah. That's why I'm
right?
like kind of like, people are gonna do what they're gonna do. They do what I say, George. They do what they do, and I'm gonna be me. So you do you, and I'll be me. And that's pretty much how it is. I'm not gonna be mean. I'm not gonna be mean to you, belittle you, or anything else. It's just you do what you do, and I'm just gonna be me, and that's it. So I have to.
I
We
think
have to.
it's easier. I think it's easier said than to practice all the time.
Well, I have to
Right?
deal with. I have to deal with.
Being politically correct is not the easiest thing when you're at a certain age, right?
Yeah.
You get to a certain age based off of where you come from. I think, people in their 20s and 30s, it's probably a lot easier to be adaptable to being as politically correct because it's just part of the nature of their lives.
Yes.
And I think people in their 60s and 70s, we're still kind of, even though we may have come from a little bit of the freedom that we had in the 60s and 70s, it's still a little bit difficult to always accept things for what they are, right?
Yeah, yeah. Because my dad, my mom, and some people older, like their
Oh,
their
I know for
filter
sure
is
your dad.
their filter is gone. But I like the thing is I deal with so much because of my son and all of his, like some of his friends and just other people that I see, like it's there already. It's just I see how he does it, how he deals with it. And I just have to like, I see them. And it's his friends that I seen them when they were in high school. I seen some of them in junior high, and now they're just not that same person. They're somebody different.
Yeah.
They turned the corner. So
I mean, like I said, it's the world is not what it was,
yeah,
but it's always going to be the world.
and it's gonna change and
And
change.
you learn to live in it and
Yeah.
learn to accept part of it, right? I think for me, part of it has always been though. I think the willingness to evolve as a human being, and I think once I got sober, that's 24 years now. I think I've been willing to be a different person a lot of times, but I've been stubborn as hell to change. um, and then recently, having given up cigars, and that's allowed for a different change to come into my life even further, right? I think with the thought that we're only here once. Obviously, there are people who have a different perspective of that, but in this form that I am today, that I've been trying to change consistently and be a better person as much as I can. And doesn't mean that the demons from your past they go 100% away. And the childhood trauma, as much as you work on it, or at least in my perspective of how I've worked on it, and trying to make it as right as I possibly can, requires still a lot of work. Still requires a lot of work.
Yeah.
Still requires a lot of work.
That's cool. I mean, I understand. So,
Yeah.
yeah, we're all still working. We still work and try to make it through life and not get canceled. And
I mean, and being willing to adapt. I think
Yeah.
a lot of it has to be willing to adapt. I mean, I feel fortunate enough that I hadn't pigeonholed myself into one way of life, and so that's allowed me to accept some stuff and move towards some things,
yeah,
and today it's, I think, probably the best it's ever been. I mean, I think right now, today is probably like at that point in my life where I'm like at the happiest.
yeah,
Much more content today than I've ever been.
yeah. That's good. That's good to hear.
Yeah.
But you've been through a lot though. You've been through like drugs and alcohol and just that, and you've been sober for a while, so that's a big difference. How you've been like working with that and trying to just with that you're going through that. That's a lot to go through with everything changing in the world and just trying to still be irrelevant and not relevant, but like politically correct and all that other kind of stuff, right?
The true indicator has been that, I probably am more at peace of who I am. I'm no longer trying to fight to fit in the mold of whatever it is, and I'm not fighting to want to prove that I'm black.
Yeah.
I'm not fighting wanting to prove that I'm white. I mean, I'm just comfortable just being Norrell today than I ever have been. And I think for a long time I was kind of caught in between those both worlds, trying to fit in.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I know. Our window was real small. The light skin was really small.
Yeah, being light skinned, being in.
Yeah.
But I was never really in. That's the whole point.
No?
Because I mean, you were either not of that or
Yeah.
you weren't enough of that, right? So
Yeah.
you're not either 100% black, so
I was always there.
and you were never 100% white. So and so in my world, having been someone that's lived in multiple places and lived, and have done a lot of things and have been up and down, financially, that I've had different routes in this world to be seen as by people. And for a long time, I just didn't, I just was just human, but I think I was always still uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But today, I don't really worry too much about the whole race thing anymore.
Yeah, that's good.
You know,
So how long have you been like sober?
24 years this week. January the 5th, 1999 was the sobriety date.
Okay.
Yeah.
How's that been going?
I think the drugs and alcohol part has been removed, in the program of AA, they say, alcohol is but the symptom. I think there's so much more to why that became such a prevalent part of my life. And I think some of it is hereditary, right? I think some of it was because I can go back 4 generations in front of me that of drug and alcohol users. So I believe that's part of it. And I think, it's the behavior part. It's that symptom that you try to fill the hole of the pain that you're in. And then once you decide you no longer want to do drugs and alcohol, it's how do I fill that pain and make up and help that small child become healed? And, there's a lot of work. And then there's just a constant unraveling of, who you are and how you can be better and what makes things work and what doesn't make them work. And, relationship stuff, that you go through and trying to navigate that part of the world at the same time. So, but yeah, 24 years of not drinking and or using a drug and that's worked pretty well for me on that part of it. But the behavioral part of it and some of the things that I had believed in and chased never got removed just because I stopped doing drugs and alcohol.
Yeah. So how did you stop doing drugs and alcohol? Like what helped you?
Going to federal prison.
Well, that
Yeah.
would be.
Yeah. Waking up one morning in federal prison and then having a program that they offered that would get me out sooner, and then taking a hold of that program, never thinking I was going to stay sober and stuff, and then coming home and going to AA, and then from AA meeting someone who was willing to work with me and offer me some solution to that problem. And then that became a solution to, okay, I won't do that anymore. But not having 100% worked on some of the other stuff that I suffer from.
Okay.
So that part's been kind of the easy part, to be honest with you. The not doing drugs and alcohol have been kind of easy for me.
Okay.
Because I still go to meetings and I still participate in that part. But I think the criminal part of my life wasn't removed, and it took a long time for that part to be removed, and it took actually going back to prison again for that to actually finally be removed again. So now it's the chase of money isn't as great.
Yeah.
It's not as great. It's not as great, but it's still there. It's still there.
I hear you.
You know.
Yeah, it's different. Yeah, so now that you're out you're going to stay out, and
Yes.
then you're not going to do drugs anymore. You're starting businesses here and there.
Yep.
So how's that going? Like, how's that the transition to
Well, the interesting
to illegal, from illegal to legal, and just trying to stay straight?
The interesting part is I've always done legal businesses. It's just within inside those legal businesses that something popped up, and I would forsake the legal side to try doing something or a shortcut faster, right? But this last, I was doing one thing I really enjoyed doing, which was selling the artificial turf. And then, that just opened the door to some other things. And for a moment there, was looking at the cryptocurrency. And then that whole thing collapsed about the time I started to do that. And then I got brought into doing what they call precious metals, gold and silver. And that's something that just started doing that. And that seems to be will be my last hurrah in business. This will be the last thing I probably end up doing. And then right off into the sunset.
Okay.
Whatever that's going to be.
All right. So what are you doing now? What is it?
Selling precious metals to mainly people's 401 and their IRA, getting them to transfer their retirement funds into precious metals to hedge against the recession that's coming on board, and how to keep themselves safe, from what's getting ready to happen. A lot of them have fear that the government has a digital currency that they're getting ready to start doing. They have a digital currency that they've already started to put in place. So just, trying to educate them a little bit on that, and using that platform to, I guess, protect my daughter at the end, give her something to look back on, and for my my significant other, for her and I to at least for the last part of our life, the next 20 years together, try to enjoy it a little bit.
That sounds fun. Sounds great now.
Yeah,
Hope everything goes great for you, and you keep on that path.
Well, mainly it's and then at the end of the day, give back a little bit, and then then it's over. The bus ride comes to a stop.
Yep.
Not much more you can really do about it.
Well, that sounds like, let's end it there, because that's it. The bus ride hasn't came to a stop, but thanks
It's
a lot,
always
man.
good hanging out with my cousin.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah, we'll get you back again. We'll talk some more, and then I'm gonna get your other brother in.
All right.
I want to get both. I want to get Arlen and Melroy together. Well, not
That'd be
together, but
interesting. I'd love to hear that one.
yeah.
I know.
We talk a lot,
Yeah.
See about his problems, and hopefully I can help him out. Just
Oh, well, someone should. Yeah.
yeah, he's a handful.
He definitely is.
But
He
yes.
definitely is. But I think we all are in our own way or not.
Yes, we are.
Yeah.
We are.
All right, cool.
All right, man. Thanks a lot, and
All right.
24/7. Thanks a lot, everybody, for listening. Like and subscribe, Melroy.
Yep.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Bye.